I'm 45 years old, a contractor, a man who works with his hands, who feels the texture of wood, the weight of bricks, and the sharp edge of a saw blade, like some men feel the air they breathe. I'm not a man who stands back and dreams about what could be. I don't talk about building empires or changing the world. I get my hands dirty, I lay the foundation, and I fix what's broken. When something needs to be built, I'm the guy you call. I'm reliable, I'm steady. My wife Emily was always the opposite. She was neat, polished, an accountant. Numbers, ledgers, spreadsheets, that was her world. It's not that she didn't know how to work hard. She did in her own way. But it was a different kind of work, a work that didn't require calloused hands or sweat staining your shirt. She worked in a quiet office, with quiet people, in a world that never seemed to move faster than a pencil's scratch across paper. We met years ago, when I was still climbing the early steps of my career. I was younger then, eager to build, always looking for the next job, the next project. She was my balance, the woman who kept me grounded. She could handle the business side while I took care of the labor. We worked together like that for a while, and things were good. But over time, something shifted. The small cracks started appearing in the foundation of our marriage. She would say things like, "You never finish anything," or "You always start strong, but you don't follow through." At first, I shrugged it off. People say things in passing, but then it started to wear on me. The things she said began to echo over and over in my mind. You never finish anything. You always start strong, but don't follow through. It wasn't just that she was making observations. It felt like she was giving up on me. Slowly, quietly, she began to question the life we built together. It wasn't the work, I realized. It wasn't the fact that I was a contractor. It was that deep down she didn't think I had the potential to move beyond this. She dreamed of more. She wanted levels, as she put it. She'd always say, "Why don't you aim higher? Why don't you look for something bigger? You're not just a worker, you could own your own business, be a developer, do something more than just hammer nails." But I had always been satisfied with the work I did. To me, the value was in the work itself, not in the dream of what could be. I never needed to be the boss of something bigger. I just needed to build. But Emily, she wanted more. And slowly her hunger for something more became a constant undercurrent in our conversations. Then one day he appeared. Jack, a client of hers, she said. He needed help with investments, or so I was told. He was a charming guy, tall, confident, with that kind of easy smile that disarmed you the moment he spoke. Emily spoke about him with a new energy, like the air had shifted in the room when he was around. It wasn't anything overt, not at first. But I noticed the little things, the way she smiled when he called, the way she would pause mid-conversation, as if waiting for something. I wasn't blind. I could see the changes, even if I didn't want to acknowledge them. And then came the conversation, the one that shifted everything. "I think it's time we talk," Emily said one evening after dinner. She had that look in her eyes, the one that meant a decision had already been made in her mind. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I asked, setting down my fork. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady but distant. "I think I need more than what you can give me. I want to live with someone who builds, not someone who digs." The words hit like a blow to the chest. I sat there for a moment, trying to process them. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I already knew. "You know," she said, avoiding my eyes, "I need someone who builds things, someone who's moving forward. Jack, he's doing that. I think we should separate." I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just sat there, feeling the weight of it settle on me. Slowly, as if waking from a dream, I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the darkening sky. The thought of Jack didn't even make me angry. I didn't care who he was. What hurt wasn't the man. It was the way Emily had pulled away. The way she had made a decision without so much as a conversation about what we were. I had built things in my life. I had built our home, our family, our future. But it wasn't enough for her. She wanted more, and I had never been the man who could give that to her. I was too steady, too rooted, too much of a man who would always get the job done, but never dream big enough. "She's gone," Emily said, as if that could explain everything. The words lingered in the air, hanging there like dust in the sunlight. "I'll get the papers drawn up," she said. And just like that, my marriage ended. It wasn't a dramatic ending. There were no tears or shouting matches, no big confrontation. It was just quiet. She left, taking only what she could carry. Jack was waiting, I assumed, though he never spoke a word to me. They were already planning their life together, the life she had wanted all along, the life I couldn't provide. And me? I kept working. I didn't complain, didn't cry. I just worked. I moved on, or at least I tried to. In the months that followed, I moved to a different area of town. It wasn't a conscious decision at first. It was just where the next job took me. But it was better that way. I needed space, both from the memories and from the people who knew Emily and me as a couple. I kept my head down, my hands busy. Every morning, I left my small apartment and went to the work site, as usual. I kept busy, too busy to think about what had happened. Emily and I didn't speak, of course. The divorce papers were signed without incident, and that was the last I heard from her. But it didn't take long before I started hearing things through mutual acquaintances. "She's with Jack now, you know. Bought a new place together." I didn't need to ask for details. I didn't care. But I knew that she had moved on, just as she always wanted. Jack had given her the life she thought she deserved, and I was out of the picture. The thought of her, of them, didn't sting anymore. It had faded into something distant, something I didn't need to confront. Months passed. It wasn't like I was a stranger to hard work. In fact, it was the only thing that had kept me from sinking. But one day, about a year later, I found myself standing at a construction site where things didn't feel quite right. I was checking the project details, double-checking the plans, when the phone rang. I didn't recognize the name on the caller ID. "Hello," I said. "Hi, is this Mr. Harris?" It was a voice I didn't recognize. "Yes," I replied, though I had no idea who this was. "I'm with a company looking for a contractor for a new apartment renovation. We heard you're the man for the job." I paused for a moment. I'd taken on a few projects in the past few months, but this was different. Something about the call felt a little too convenient. "We're looking to renovate an apartment," the voice continued. "A total overhaul. We need someone who can manage the work, keep things on schedule." "Sounds good. Who am I working with on this?" "Let me get the project details to you first," the voice said. "I'll send you the contract details, and then we can talk specifics." The details came through in an email soon after. The apartment was in a new building, right on the edge of the city center. It was a nice project, big, modern. I could see why they wanted to go all in. But when I glanced at the name on the contract, something shifted in my stomach. I didn't recognize the name immediately, but there was something familiar about it. I had to pause, really think for a moment. Then it hit me. Jack. That was her new partner's name. I hadn't realized it at first. The name was slightly altered in the paperwork, probably to keep it under wraps. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew. It wasn't a coincidence. They were building a life, a new home, with all the luxuries they could afford, and I was going to be the one to help them get there. I knew right then that I had a choice. I could walk away from this job, let them have their perfect little world, or I could do something more, something precise, something calculated. I signed the contract. It wasn't about revenge, at least not at first. It was simply business. But deep down, I knew what was coming. The job began soon after. I had a team of workers, and we were moving fast. The building was a mess when we started. Old wiring, cracked plaster, pipes that needed to be replaced. But the job was straightforward enough, or so I thought. The first day I walked into that apartment, I saw her, Emily. She was standing in the middle of the room, hands on her hips, looking over the plans with Jack. He was pointing out things to her, giving suggestions, talking about renovations, and she was smiling that smile, the one that used to be mine to see. I stood still for a moment, hidden behind a stack of drywall, watching them. She looked good. She was happy. There was no doubt in my mind that this was the life she'd always dreamed of. Living in this fancy, polished apartment with a man who had money to burn. She hadn't noticed me yet. She was too focused on the plans. I wasn't going to introduce myself. I didn't need to. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there to do my job, and my job was simple: make sure the work got done. But as I watched them, something in me shifted. I wasn't angry, not exactly, but I knew what I had to do. I couldn't make her regret leaving me. That was beyond me now. But I could do something else, something that would send a message. I started to slow things down, just a little at first. The tiles arrived late, no fault of mine. The paint color they picked didn't quite match the sample. Again, not my fault. The cabinets were on back order. Again, nothing I could control. Each delay, each hiccup, I kept a careful record. Everything was documented. She would come by, checking the progress. Jack would stand beside her, puffing out his chest, giving his advice, and I would just nod, smile, and tell them, "It's coming along, just need a bit more time." The project wasn't behind schedule, not yet, but I was starting to take longer on things, to let the small issues build up. The drywall cracks weren't properly sealed. Oh, it was an easy fix, but I'd have to wait for the next delivery. The plumbing wasn't quite right. Sure, it'll take a few extra days, but we'll get there. I wasn't lying. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I could see the cracks starting to form in the veneer of their perfect life. The dream apartment wasn't quite so perfect anymore, and it was all legal. Nothing they could do about it. The contract had been written in a way that gave me the ability to halt the work at any time, if I saw fit. I wasn't sure if Emily had noticed yet, but I wasn't about to stop. Not yet. The days turned into weeks, and the delays piled up, each one a little nudge in a game I hadn't quite decided how to play yet. The cracks in the smooth surface of their new life were widening. It wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no public scenes. Everything was quiet, measured, and beneath the surface, a tension was building. I was making sure of that. I knew she wasn't completely aware of what was happening. She hadn't connected the dots yet, but Jack, I could tell, was starting to get frustrated. He'd ask questions, send emails asking for updates, all the while trying to keep a good face on it. He'd call me, politely, but with that underlying impatience I recognized from years of dealing with clients. And I'd explain the delays, always in a calm, reasonable tone. I was professional, courteous, but every word I spoke carried a weight. And then came the day when she was standing in the middle of the apartment again, clipboard in hand, Jack beside her, looking at a set of blueprints. I had been in and out, checking on things, but now it was time for something more. Emily didn't see me at first. She was inspecting the space, a frown on her face as she looked over the unfinished walls, the electrical work, the missing cabinets. Jack was going through the details with the foreman, oblivious to me standing there. I wasn't a stranger anymore. I was just another worker, another contractor. I took a step forward, clearing my throat. She turned around at the sound, and for a moment I saw her hesitate. A flicker of recognition flashed in her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She didn't know what to make of it. I wasn't her husband anymore. I wasn't the man who had stood by her side, offering the same tired assurances every time something went wrong. I was just the guy in charge now, and that's all she saw. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice polite but distant, as if we were strangers. "It's coming along," I said, just like I always had. "But it'll take a bit more time." She nodded, scribbling something on her clipboard. Jack was still focused on the details, and I could tell he was starting to get more agitated. I didn't care. It wasn't until later that week that I realized how far I'd gone, how deeply I'd woven myself into this situation. I had already made my decision. I'd allowed this to go on long enough, stretched the deadlines just enough to make them uncomfortable without breaking the contract. I was playing the long game, and I was playing it well. Every day I worked, I did my job, but I did it slowly, deliberately. Small issues cropped up, things that weren't quite right, the tiles, the grout, minor things at first, but enough to cause frustration. And with every delay, every call to the supplier, every excuse, I saw Jack's patience starting to wear thin. But I wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. The moment came when I realized it. It was a quiet moment in the midst of a long day. I was standing in the middle of the living room, looking over some of the finished work, and I thought to myself, this is it, I'm done. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't resentful. I wasn't plotting anything grand. I simply understood the power I had in this situation. I had control, the kind of control that only comes from having a contract and knowing exactly when to pull back. I didn't have to shout or yell. I didn't have to make a scene. I had the power to stop everything, to end it all at the right moment. The key was to wait, to give them just enough time to think they were getting what they wanted, to build their hope and expectation up until it was too late to change course. That's when I would pull the plug. I was becoming comfortable with the idea. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about balance. I had given her everything she wanted, everything she needed. Now I was taking my moment back. The world had been so quick to judge me, so quick to write me off. But I was going to show them that I wasn't someone who just gave up. I could finish things, but I would finish them on my terms. The idea didn't come to me all at once. It was a slow realization, a quiet understanding that I was not the man she thought I was, and I was ready to put that understanding into action. In the following days, I continued to delay. More problems cropped up. The wrong countertops were delivered. The plumbing needed to be redone in one section. The hardwood floors were installed incorrectly. It wasn't a series of mistakes. It was a series of delays, each one carefully documented. The project wasn't behind schedule yet, but I was giving it just enough push to make things difficult. Jack started to question things more and more, his patience wearing thin. Emily, ever the pragmatic accountant, had started to ask for updates more frequently. She had already begun to notice something wasn't right, but she wasn't the one who would confront me. That would be Jack. He was the one who would take action. He was the one who would try to fix it. And when that happened, that's when I would finally show them I wasn't who they thought I was. It had been 3 weeks since the last delay, and things had reached a tipping point. Jack had started calling me directly, bypassing the foreman, asking about the timeline, demanding answers. I could hear the frustration in his voice, and I knew he was getting close to the breaking point. Emily, meanwhile, had been quieter, watching things unfold with that distant, calculating expression I had seen all too often over the years. She had her own way of keeping her cool, but she couldn't hide the growing unease that had settled in. I'd been doing my job, ensuring that every issue, no matter how minor, was documented. The delays, the mistakes, the ongoing problems, each one carefully placed, each one adding a layer of pressure. There was no question about it now. I was controlling the situation. It wasn't until Jack called me on a Monday morning that I knew things were finally coming to a head. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight, almost clipped. "This is getting ridiculous. The work is behind schedule, and you're not being upfront with us. What's going on?" I was sitting in my office when he called, the sun barely filtering through the window, casting long shadows across the desk. I didn't rush to respond. I could hear the anger in his voice, the mounting frustration that had been building for weeks. He had no idea who he was dealing with, but I wasn't about to reveal anything yet. "I'm just being honest with you, Jack," I said, my tone calm and even. "There are issues with the work. We're addressing them. It'll take a little more time." "That's what you keep saying." His voice rose. "And nothing ever gets fixed. This is your job, and you're failing to do it. I've had enough of the excuses." I could feel the satisfaction bubbling up inside me. Jack wasn't the type to shout, but now he was on the edge. I had him right where I wanted him. "We're making progress," I said without hesitation, "but some things can't be rushed. It's going to take more time to do it right." "You're not hearing me," he snapped. "This needs to be finished now." I paused, letting the silence settle between us. When I spoke again, I made sure every word was measured, deliberate. "Jack," I said slowly, "this project, like any other, has a clear schedule. You agreed to the terms in the contract, and that includes the possibility of delays. It's all written there. I can't speed up what's not ready." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Jack spoke again, I could hear the crack in his voice. "You're just making excuses. You're not the man for this job, and you know it." I let his words hang in the air for a moment before responding. "Perhaps," I said, "but I know my rights, and I'm well within them to stop this work whenever I see fit." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, until Jack spoke again. quieter this time. "You can't do that." "I can," I replied simply. "And I will." The decision was made. I could hear Jack trying to work through the realization, his mind scrambling for a way out, for some way to salvage the situation. But it was too late. I had built my case, and now it was time to act. I hung up without waiting for a response, then immediately began drafting the notice to halt work. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even excited. I was calm. In fact, I felt a strange peace settle over me as I printed out the papers. It wasn't about power, not in the way people might think. It was about control, control over a situation that had been slowly eroding my dignity for months. I wasn't going to be pushed around anymore. I sent the email to Jack and Emily's lawyer, along with a copy of the contract and a brief explanation. I was halting the work on the property as per the agreement, effective immediately. I wasn't interested in negotiating. It was done. The following afternoon, Emily called me, her voice tight with tension. "I don't understand what's happening," she said. "Why are you stopping work? What's going on?" "I'm doing what the contract allows," I replied evenly. "The project is at a standstill, and I'm well within my rights to stop work when I deem it necessary." She was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to find a way to reverse this, to bring things back to the way they had been. But I wasn't going to let that happen. "You're being unreasonable," she finally said, her voice laced with frustration. "I don't think so," I said. "You may not like it, but it's the reality. There's no more work being done." "I'll have my lawyer contact you," she snapped. "Do what you need to do," I replied, already preparing myself for whatever response they'd come up with. The contract was clear, and I knew it better than anyone. I hung up, and for a moment I just sat there. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even relieved. But there was something in the silence that felt satisfying. I had made my decision, and it was final. This wasn't about getting back at her. It wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about the fact that I had been underestimated, and now I had shown them who I really was. I knew the next few days would be difficult for them, for Jack especially. They would argue, maybe threaten me, but I didn't care. The damage was done. And that's when I saw it for the first time. Emily was no longer in control. It had been nearly a month since I halted the project, and things had settled into an uneasy quiet. Jack and Emily's lawyer had sent a few letters, but none of them had made a dent. I'd responded with firm references to the contract, reiterating my right to suspend work when the situation warranted it. They tried pushing back, of course, but I knew that the law was on my side. I hadn't budged an inch. Then one afternoon, I found myself walking past their new apartment. The construction site was a shell of what it could have been. Empty walls, exposed pipes, electrical wiring hanging from the ceiling like the lifeless remnants of a dream. The kitchen was just a frame, the bathroom incomplete, and there were no lights in the hallway. From the outside, the apartment looked finished, but once you stepped inside, it was a different story entirely. They had been living there for months now, but the place was far from ready. No kitchen, no bathroom, just a series of half-finished rooms and a growing sense of discomfort that was impossible to ignore. I paused in front of the building, leaning against a lamppost, and watched for a while. I could hear laughter coming from the second floor. It was Emily and Jack. They were still there, pretending like everything was fine. But I knew better. I knew what it was like to live with the weight of things unsaid, of the half-built lies that had kept us together for so long. I had been the one who kept everything solid, who knew how to finish what we started. But they couldn't finish this, and now they were stuck in the middle, trapped by their own choices. As I stood there, I saw Emily walk past the window. She was carrying something, probably a set of towels or blankets, her face drawn in frustration. She looked different now, older in a way I hadn't expected. The confidence she once had was gone, replaced with something more tired, more uncertain. She didn't see me standing there, but I could see her clearly through the window. A few minutes later, I heard Jack's voice from inside, rising in volume. His words were muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. He was angry, probably at the state of things, probably at her. "We can't keep living like this, Emily. We need to finish this place. Why isn't anything getting done?" I didn't need to hear more. I turned and walked away. The next morning, I got a call. It was from Emily's lawyer, who was trying to figure out how to force me to continue the work. They were demanding that I either resume the project or face legal consequences. They had no grounds, of course, but that didn't stop them from trying to intimidate me. I let the call go to voicemail. There was no point in engaging. They could push all they wanted, but the project was finished in my mind. 3 days later, I was walking through the neighborhood again when I saw her standing outside, pacing. She looked frantic, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Emily. I had expected this moment. I knew it would come. She was finally facing the reality of what she had done. She had placed her bets on a future with Jack, on this new life they were supposed to build, and now she was watching it crumble. I could feel her eyes on me as I walked past. I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge her. But I could tell she was struggling with the weight of the situation. The unspoken words hung in the air between us, and for the first time in my life, I understood something that had always eluded me, the need for completion. Her call came 2 days later. I could tell from the tone of her voice that she had run out of options. "You've made your point," she said, her voice barely audible. "You've won." "I haven't won anything, Emily," I replied, my tone soft but firm. "I'm just finishing what I started." Her silence stretched on for a moment. Then quietly she asked, "Why didn't you ever fight for us? Why didn't you try to make it work?" I took a deep breath before answering, my mind drifting back to the past, to all the years we spent together, to the arguments, the disappointments, the moments when I had tried, in my own way, to hold everything together. "I fought, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "But you weren't fighting with me. You were fighting your own battles. You made your choice. I just let it be." "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, and there was something in her voice, genuine remorse perhaps, but it didn't move me. "Maybe you didn't," I said, "but the hurt happened anyway, and I had to move on." I hung up without waiting for a reply. For a moment, everything felt still. There was no relief, no satisfaction, just a quiet understanding that I had done what needed to be done. The next day, I received a letter from Emily. It wasn't a legal letter. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was a simple note, handwritten, almost like a confession. She thanked me for holding my ground. She admitted that the decisions she made were hers alone. She apologized for the way things ended, for the way we ended. I didn't respond. And then, nearly 7 months after I'd walked away from the project, I found myself walking by their apartment once more. The windows were dark, and I knew they had to be home. I heard her voice through the cracked window, and I stopped in my tracks. "Why isn't everything finished?" she was shouting. "We've been living here like this for months. Why isn't it done?" I stood there watching for a moment, my hands buried in my pockets. The frustration in her voice was familiar, but I felt nothing. I took a deep breath, turned, and walked away, heading toward the horizon where my life, my work, and my choices were still unfolding. For the first time in my life, I understood that finishing something doesn't always mean reaching the end. Sometimes the real completion comes when you know exactly when to stop. And for me, that moment had come,